This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In this episode, we're talking to Professor Christopher Gardner, Stanford nutrition researcher and director of the Stanford Prevention Research Center's Nutrition Studies Group. He's the scientist behind some of the most influential nutrition studies of the past 2 decades, and we're exploring how his research is shifting from individual dietary interventions to transforming entire food systems. You'll hear about his work with the Culinary Institute of America, his recent twin study featured in the Netflix documentary You Are What You Eat, and why he thinks dining halls could be a way to change how we all eat. Let's get into it. Professor Gardner, Christopher, I'm thrilled to have you with us today.
Paul, I think this will be a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to it.
So we've known each other for some time and recently shared a stage at the Menus of Change in the Culinary Institute of America earlier this year. Tell us a little bit about why are you participating in events on Menus for Change and at places like the Culinary Institute of America?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. How much do I have? 10 seconds or 10 minutes? Because this could be a long explanation.
Let's go in between.
I was actually on the scientific advisory board that initiated the Menus of Change. So I've been involved with them for maybe 15 years, maybe it's 13 or 14 at this point. I got invited to go to Harvard, and maybe 15 of us sat around the room, and we're presented with a challenge. And the challenge was, God, the chefs are really tired of this. One day it's vegan, and then it's paleo, and then it's gluten-free, and then it's keto. And wow, we're trying to train these chefs, and they're very reactive. They made a great new menu, and then the public has changed their mind, and it's like whiplash, and they have to design them all over again. Can this scientific advisory board tell us the stuff that won't change? This is not going to go away. So that if chefs wanted to be more proactive, they could take into account these principles of the Menus of Change. And simultaneously with our group, Paul, there was a business board and a chef board.
Amazing.
And they put all three of those perspectives together and said, from a business perspective, if you were in the food industry and you didn't want to face this whiplash, here's some good scientific principles that make business sense, that allow a chef to be creative and earn a good living. What would it be? So I have actually been part of that ever since the beginning. I go to that meeting every single year. And every 2 or 3 years, I get asked to present. And this last year, I was lucky enough to join you on a panel.
Amazing. So one of the things we chatted about was protein. And, one of the things every time I go to the US, I'm always amazed with the hyper fixation on protein. It feels like everyone's talking about, but where's the protein? What protein have you got? So I want to start with the basics. What role does protein play in our diets?
It's enormously important to our human health. Enzymes, hormones, hair, fingernails, cell structure. Fat and carbs are for energy. Protein is for all the physical stuff that we are. It's absolutely critical, but you don't really have to think about it or obsess about it. But it's important physiologically, but let's dive deeper.
Yes. So tell me, what is this buzz around protein? Why are people so obsessed with it? Why? Obviously it's important, but why are people obsessed with getting more protein and having protein water and protein this and protein that?
Clearly because of misunderstanding. I think because of the internet, social influencers, things like this. It sells. I think capitalism is behind it because it really doesn't make any sense. If you look at data in the US and across the world, but let's focus on the US because I think the obsession is largely in the US. People get more than enough protein. Hardly. I've been at conferences, Paul, where I am equally bewildered by this protein thing. And I say, how many of you have vegans or vegetarians as physicians in your practice? Because I speak at a lot of medical conferences.
Yeah.
So everybody raises their hand. I don't just treat vegans or vegetarians, but we all have some of those. Sure. I say, how many of you in your entire career have ever treated anyone for protein deficiency? To this day, not a single hand has gone up. And what's really fun is like looking at the people in the front row saying, well, I haven't, but I'm sure my colleagues have. Let me turn around. What? No one behind me? No one in front of me? Wait, where is this coming from? It's really bizarre. It's unsubstantiated. And I think it's driven by money. And it's also, Paul, driven by, think how young America is. So we don't really have a great food culture that goes back centuries. It only goes back a little bit. And for one point, we vilified fat, and then we vilified carb. And there's really only three sources of calories: proteins, fat, and carb, unless you want to talk about alcohol, which we're not going to do today. And given like there's been these fat carb wars, nobody ever trash talked protein before. And for some reason, the lack of trash talk has raised protein on a pedestal. Also, the obsession in magazines of fitness with health and musculature and body image. But I do think protein is misunderstood in many categories. One of them is in weight loss, and one of them is in satiety, and one of them is in energy level. And so there's sort of these myths about protein that are, to be honest, pretty much all wrong. They're all myths. It's not a big deal. Maybe for some older people and maybe for some competitive bodybuilders or people who don't have access to good variety of food, like they have very limited access to quality food and variety of food. But for the most part, it's not warranted.
So tell me what, people that are having a lot of extra protein, what happens to that protein? So if you're on a protein only diet or you're a high protein diet and you're eating all your protein every meal and reducing your carbs, what actually happens in your body?
I'm going to surprise a lot of people out there because I bring this up quite often, and it's kind of funny how people don't get it. But I need to put it in the context of fats and carbs, if you don't mind. So fats, just really quickly, let's do this for 15 seconds. If you ate extra fat for the day, more than you needed, where would you store it and how much could you store? And the answer is, I'm going to tell you ahead of time, unless you want to guess, infinite amounts everywhere. It's in your butt, it's in your belly, it's under your arms, it's in the fat pads of your hand, unlimited everywhere. Switch quickly to carbs. I bet you're going to have some athletes listening that are runners.
Yeah.
And not everybody knows this, but runners know this. Like if you were going to carb load before your marathon, you can't carb load constantly and just build up your carb stores. You put a little bit in your liver and a little bit in your skeletal muscle. And after a dinner and lunch of pasta, you're done. You can't store any more carbs as carb. And so anything you eat extra after the liver and the skeletal muscle are full, you turn that into fat. So you can't keep storing carb. So the protein is the most fun. So if you ate more protein than you needed, how much could you store and where would you store it? Is it in your spleen? Is it in your elbow? Is it in your big toe? Is it in
your muscles, surely?
There's no place to store. So when you store fat in your butt and belly, it's not doing anything, and you can draw on it anytime you want or leave it there. If you carb loaded for a marathon and you don't need it, you don't run the marathon, it stays in your liver and in your skeletal muscle. But protein, there's no place to store it where it's not doing anything. Your answer is partly correct. So you could call the skeletal muscle a storage depot, but it's functional there. It's not like it's just sitting there to be stored, to be drawn upon anytime. Let's say you didn't get enough protein tomorrow and you drew from the stores and you broke down the protein that was in your bicep or your quadricep. Your bicep and quadricep would be weaker. You just lost functional protein. So the way to store carb and fat is benign, that you can draw from anytime you want. As soon as you've made all your enzymes, hormones, fingernails, cell structure, at the end of the day, probably doesn't last more than a day, it turns into carbs, which is really funny. If we could bring up the one funniest group is the keto folks who know that keto is a very, very low carb diet. Most people on keto don't understand that the idea is it's a very high fat diet, because if you do it with meat, which is very low carb, and you eat a lot of meat and you get a lot of protein, and you were doing your best to get rid of carbs, and you ate so much meat that you met all your needs, and guess what? You turned that extra meat into carbs. You just
amazing
threw yourself out of ketosis by turning your amino acids into carbs because you didn't read the book. Keto diet is all fat. It's not meat.
So does this focus on protein, in your view, detract from the importance of diverse diets and health outcomes?
Oh, so much. So just there's so many different directions we could take this, but I think the critical one is, at least in the US, and I'm going to guess in most Western diets, including Australia, right? So Americans get like half the recommendation of fiber and
Wow.
more than enough protein. So when they're seeking more protein, they're usually going to get a shake or a bar, or they're going to have meat. None of those things usually have fiber. They're worried about protein. They're eating more protein. And by getting those calories, they're less hungry for beans, grains, vegetables, nuts, seeds that are all the main sources of fiber and have the antioxidants that doesn't come in meat and in animal products. And it's got a balance. All the vitamins and minerals we need, those are in balance across all the different food groups. I mean, if you just ate red bell peppers, if you just ate broccoli, you wouldn't get everything you need. You need a variety of food. So if you are overly focused on protein, the calories you're getting from those foods are displacing calories you could have got that brought fiber and other important nutrients with them.
So you mentioned beans. We're big fans of beans as well.
Really? How about that?
Yeah. So what are the current numbers of beans, peas, pulse, legume, consumption in the US that you see at the moment, and maybe globally, if you've got that on the tip of your tongue as well? Like, are we getting enough?
So we're not getting enough. Well, no, globally, no, I'm going to stay focused on the US. I mean, in many cultures around the world, beans are super economically viable and storage-wise, they're great. It's easy to store dried beans and keep them as a safe source of food. But in the US, like the American Dietary Guidelines currently suggest, and let's get into this Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee that I just participated in, where we suggested eating more beans. But for now, let's just say the most recent guidelines, which have not been updated, suggest you should have, and I'm not sure of the exact number, but it is something like about 1.5 cups a week.
Okay.
Or maybe it's 2 cups. You might even know better than I. But the sad fact is Americans don't even get that. They get like 1/8 of a cup a day.
Okay.
Which is not enough. That's not enough beans. And are we going to do the word legumes or not? Because I think we should do the word legumes. Is it okay?
We can use legumes.
Okay, well, I want to tell you a funny story about legumes. Should we save it for later, or can I do it now?
No, go for it.
Okay, so Americans definitely don't know the word legumes. Americans don't use that word. If you're a science professional and you're writing about things and you're just saying, what are all the good things to eat? Oh, vegetables and fruits, that's pretty easy to say. Whole grains, nuts and seeds. And then what do you say when it comes to that other category? Legumes is actually the best term, but Americans don't know what it is. And so if you say beans, you've left out peas and lentils. And if you say that, you've left out pulses. And if you say that, you've left out something else. So over time, I have learned, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, botanically, legumes hierarchically is the overall best term. And immediately under that, if you ever see a graphic of it, you'll see fresh beans and peas, and you'll see soy, and you'll see peanuts, which sound like a nut, but technically peanuts are legumes. And then another category is pulses. And then under the pulses, you'll see dried beans and peas, separate from fresh, and you'll see chickpeas, and you'll see lentils.
Yeah.
And then under lentils, there's all kinds of colors of lentils and sizes and things like that. So as a nutrition scientist, when I'm writing about stuff and I'm trying to say, oh, a good dietary pattern has this, that, and the other thing, we were doing this on a committee that I served on, and one group studied beans, and one said they did legumes, and another one said they did chickpeas, and another one said they did peanuts. And so we were all tripping over our tongues, like, how many words do we use? And they said, let's just say legumes, because that covers it all. And they said, no, Americans won't even know what that word is. And that was pretty funny because the communication folks got together and they met and they said, yes, you're all using very inconsistent language. We think from now on you should say beans, peas, and lentils. And we said, but that's more than legumes. But what about the chickpeas? And what about the peanuts? And they said, get over it. Americans can't handle that many words. And beans, peas, and lentils covers a lot of it. We said, but this study didn't look at beans or peas or lentils. It only looked at beans. And they said, too bad. For the sake of communication purposes for the American public, you are now going to have to say beans, peas, and lentils every time you want to mention this category because the alternatives are less efficient. I think that is hilarious. So I say beans. I now say beans, peas, and lentils. But what I mean is legumes.
Interesting. So you were talked a little bit about the dietary guidelines, and you were on the dietary guidelines advisory group. What role do these dietary guidelines, or how do they help us transition to a more sustainable dietary pattern and a healthy dietary pattern? What role do they play?
Okay, so in the U.S., that different roles. Let me tell you first, sort of how they originated. They started in 1980.
Yeah.
And a group of nutrition folks got together and said, you should eat this. And then they decided, just in case evidence changes every 5 years, we should update it. So it's been updated 9 or 10 times since then. And whenever they do this 2 years before the update is due, historically, they've got together 15 to 20 scientists. We can talk later if you want how they're selected. They have to be nominated and they have to be vetted for not having industry ties, or most of them have some industry ties. If you're a professional in nutrition, it's really hard to have none ever. You get 2 years, and I'll just tell you my experience because I just finished mine. We met, I had 2 hour-and-a-half Zoom meetings a week. I had assignments of papers for 2 years. I had to read papers in between. I had to fly 6 times to Washington, D.C. for 2 or 3 days. We had to hold meetings on everything that we did. We were given a list of 80 questions to consider addressing. We had to rank them. We prioritized 60 to see if we could answer the 60 first, and then if we got through them, we could try some of the others. For each of the questions, there were sub-questions that I'd be happy to get into, and we ended up generating a 400-page report with a 1,000-page supplement, going through one by one each of the questions. Here's the type of evidence we found. It is our consensus as a group. We really do know this, and this is what we should say, or we kind of know this, but we need more data, or wow, we really don't even know this. There really isn't any great evidence. So we had to rank the strength of evidence and the directionality. Does it say we should eat more or less? Well, our goal is to put this whole thing together. And in the US, there is a Secretary of Agriculture and a Secretary of Health and Human Services, and we give it to them at the end of our 2 years. And they're supposed to take that into consideration, say, okay, the last time we did this, we published the dietary guidelines. There's been research since then. Let's see if we should update any of that. And it's an advisory document, and they don't have to use any of it. And usually, traditionally, what's happened is they've used some of it, and they haven't used some of the recommendations for various reasons. I'm happy to go back to that if you want, and I hope we do later. But once you've generated these dietary guidelines, here's a funny misunderstanding in the US. So the dietary guidelines aren't actually written for the public. So they're actually written for health professionals and policymakers to review the evidence and say, oh, I have a scientific background. It was scientists who wrote this. So I'm going to now interpret that, and I'm either a policymaker working on something, or I'm a health professional, I'm a dietitian, and I'm going to use this in counseling some people. So they weren't ever really meant to be read by the American public, although they always have a couple, like, here's a 5-page graphic artist portrayal of what, here's a more consumer facing thing. But at the end of the day, Paul, in the US, the dietary guidelines for Americans get used most often for safety net programs.
Okay.
For school lunch, school breakfast, women, infants, and children. So when we're providing in the US some kind of food augmentation, supplementation, helping people who don't have enough resources, supposed to meet guidelines. So the dietary guidelines for Americans are actually most important for the people with limited resources that are getting assistance with food. And part of that's really important because every year, or at least the last few times people have done this, these committees, part of the job is to say, okay, we actually have some data on Americans. How are they eating? And they aren't even close as a whole. The nation is way off. They're not getting enough fruits or vegetables. When they're eating grains, they're eating refined grains, not whole grains. They're eating more protein than they need. They're not getting enough fiber. It is funny because there are some social influencers who say, look what the dietary guidelines have done to Americans. When they follow this, they get obese and they get heart disease and cancer. And the other group looks at it and says, but they don't follow it. That's part of the reason they get heart disease and diabetes.
Is that the conversation at the moment that's going on in America?
No, the conversation at the moment is very different because the incoming Health and Human Services Secretary has said, wow, it looks like industry wrote this 400-page report. It's unintelligible. It looks like it's completely conflicted. And so we're not going to listen to any of it. We're not going to use it at all. We're just going to come up with our own guidelines. And so what an insult to 20 of us who just volunteered 1,000 hours each over 2 years, unpaid.
Yeah.
Sucker, obviously. So as suckers, we signed up for this thing and we did our best. And it's actually, it was a fascinating process to see how much consensus there was in the group once you're looking at data in a systematic way. And to have a figure like the Secretary of Health and Human Services say, this is conflicted, it's unintelligible, and it's not good science. Here's my report. And the first report they handed in had some AI hallucinated citations that actually didn't even refer to real studies. So some of us are very frustrated.
I can understand with that much time invested to then have that discarded with a very simple, this is obviously, makes no sense. So some of your research is focused on leveraging non-health considerations to influence food habits, which, you call stealth nutrition. For those of us who don't know, what is stealth nutrition?
So first I'm going to start off and say stealth nutrition is not deception.
Yeah.
It's not like,
let's hide
this with rice, but it's really cauliflower rice. Or I'm giving my kids this sauce and I've ground up some broccoli and mushed it up. They'll never know there's broccoli in here. That to me is the wrong kind of stealth. So really what happened to me, Paul, was years and years ago, but in the first place, I never really meant to be a scientist. I really just wanted to have a vegetarian restaurant. And by mistake, I got a PhD. And by mistake, I got a faculty position at Stanford. And by mistake, I got millions of dollars of taxpayer funds to run studies. And I ran a study once that worked really well. And I made food for everybody. And I said, great, it worked. Go eat. And they said, well, I know it worked, but we don't cook. So sorry, we're not really going to do what you found. And another day I did a study that didn't work. And I said, sorry, you guys, this didn't work. And they said, well, we're going to do it anyway. It's sort of like religion and faith. And I thought, what the F? Like I found something that worked and they're not going to do it. Found something that didn't work and they're going to do it anyway. I guess I'm totally useless. By getting the professor thing and all this grant money, I sort of exceeded my personal expectations, but apparently I'm useless. And right about that time, a colleague and I applied for a grant. And the grant was designed to try to create new messages for young adults. So it's really hard to lose weight. So probably a better way to do this is prevent people from gaining weight. And this grant idea that you were supposed to apply for said, all right, can you think of a new way to message this so that young people won't gain weight? And we proposed social responsibility and engagement, just trying to be novel. And it didn't get funded. And we thought, wow, we didn't really have pilot data. Maybe to make this more viable, we should have run a little pilot study with young people. And the next idea we had was, hey, we're at Stanford surrounded by young people. Let's create a class and collect data on the students.
Yeah.
And let's never talk about health. Let's only talk about the environment, animal rights and welfare, human labor abuses in slaughterhouses, drought, religion. Let's just bring up social connections to food.
Interesting.
And see what happens. And so instead of research papers, we got a bunch of popular books. We had them watch documentaries. And Paul, that class was life-changing for me because the students within a couple weeks would show up early to class. It would be hard to get them to stop talking before class. After class, they would stick around and talk about it. We started overhearing them say, God, my roommate just wants me to shut up. I come home from this class and I can't stop talking about the things that we discussed today. And I'm trying to get my brother off this. And I'm trying to get my parents to do this. And I sent my parents the book and they love it. And they've given it to my uncle. It's like, wow, this never happened when I explained the metabolism of cholesterol. I have a PhD in science, in nutrition science, and I can talk cholesterol metabolism up one side, down the other. And for some reason, their eyes are glazing over. And when I ask them to change, they're not really changing. But here, we avoided the whole conversation. So at the end of that first year, Paul, I said, wow, this has been pretty rewarding. I think I want to teach this class again, but I'm curious of all the topics that we brought up, which ones resonated the most. And the first student with sort of tears in their eyes said, wow, I read that Jonathan Safran Foer's book, Eating Animals, and I've gone vegetarian. And the student next to her said, I grew up on a ranch and we never treated our animals poorly at all. We treated them really well. So I don't see the animal rights and welfare side of this. I see the environment side. I didn't realize that beef contributed so much to global warming. So I'm eating less beef. And the kid next to them said, wow, I don't think I really believe in greenhouse gases. I think this whole climate change thing is a hoax, but I didn't realize that these fast food franchises, the McDonald's and Burger Kings of the world, make their money off the real estate. And if a McDonald's owner were to take out a small business loan and go bankrupt, the country doesn't get their money back. The franchise owner goes out of business, but McDonald's and the other ones still get their real estate money. I think that's fiscally irresponsible. I'm not eating fast food anymore. I'm boycotting fast food. And I'm thinking, wait a sec, what the F? Like, went vegetarian, eating less beef, not eating fast food. Like, that is what I was saying with my cholesterol lecture. I was like trying to tell them about the metabolism of nutrients, and they weren't making any changes. But when I focused on these societal issues that are connected to food, they were making all kinds of changes, and the same kinds of changes I had wanted discussing health. So I was thinking, wow, this is really, I'm not deceiving them. I'm just bringing up the other connections to food that are as important as health. And I'm finding that the other key finding from all that, Paul, was there wasn't any one topic that resonated with everyone. For someone, it was animal rights and welfare. For someone, it was the environment. For someone, it was human labor abuses in slaughterhouses. For someone, it was the economy. For someone, it was religion. For someone, it was drought. And I felt like, if I really want to have some impactful change here, I need more tools in my tool chest. And I'm happy to be able to explain metabolism and have that in my back pocket, but I shouldn't lead with that because that's way more boring than the other topics for a lot of people who are just eaters.
Christopher, this really resonates with the work that we do. I mean, a lot of the time, the conversations on nutrition driven from a health perspective, and they're seeing the nutrients in isolation from the process of eating, and they're not seeing the culture and the other elements that are connected to food. And food is so personal. So that really resonates. But it also is one of the challenges, I guess, of our current system, is that to get a specialty to understand the nutrients, you have to do X number of years of research and work and become a professor. And then you tend to want to stick to your lane, and that's where your career is. But it's so great to see how you've thought about that and kind of done that wrap around to actually understand, how do I communicate as well? And I think this is a challenge often with science, is the communication element is sometimes not thought through. How do you communicate? And you've done this in so many different ways through your career. There's Netflix shows and different elements, and I think it's absolutely amazing. So when we think about this and researching and the work that you've done over 20 plus years, why is this so important? This connection between nutrition, health, sustainability, food systems, how important is that, as well as deep diving down into the cholesterol, for example, that you were just describing?
I wouldn't frame it as being important. It's sort of been a revelation that every time I go outside of my lane, I see this just incredible consistency. And actually, I'm going to take one step backward. So some of the nutrition scientists that I work with focus on diabetes, some on heart disease, some on cancer, some on body weight. And I do remember over time, a couple of people saying, oh my God, I have to eat low carb for diabetes, and I have to eat low fat for heart disease. And for kidney disease, I have to eat low protein. And then somebody said, it's actually not that different. For the diabetes, it's not just low carb, it's low refined carb, which would also be true for heart disease. And for heart disease, it's low saturated fat. Actually, the nuts and seeds and avocados are fine. And for the kidney, that high protein, that's mostly coming from a high animal meat diet. So that would be more plants. So to be honest, between cancer and heart and kidney and diabetes and weight, it's pretty much the same diet. It's not like it's a different diet. It's very similar. So then take that to the next level that you just mentioned. So now go outside of the field of nutrition and see that for the planet, animal rights and welfare, for fiscal responsibility, for all of these different factors, it's aligned. It's a whole food plant-based diet that's aligned. Doesn't mean plant exclusive or restrictive. Doesn't mean vegan. May not even be vegetarian. Flexitarian's a good word. Plant forward, plant rich, just more plants than we're eating, less animal than we're eating, and less crap, because we eat a lot of this ultra processed food, of which beans are not. Like, beans fit right into that category of being, economical, tremendous variety. Cultures across the whole planet have used those as staples. And so really the synergy of all those different angles. So you had used the word importance, and I would just say it's just overwhelming how consistent this message is. Other than being important, it is just reinforcing, synergistic, aligned. To me, it is empowering to see how aligned all these angles are if you approach it with an open mind and from an evidence-based scientific perspective, and with a heart and an eye to culture.
No, absolutely. So, in looking at that, one of the studies that you were recently involved in was this twin study that featured in the Netflix documentary "You Are What You Eat," and it talked about the significant benefits of a vegan diet. It didn't say exclusively, but it had the significant benefits. How do you balance those kinds of studies and findings with kind of a practical population level recommendation where people don't run one way versus another?
So first of all, think about, feel my pain as I'm designing a study, and I need to get it funded, I need to get it published. At some level, I have to dichotomize it so it's sort of clear that there's an A versus a B. Not just that there's, if I have one little difference, I'm not very likely to see a change. So if I want to see a change in a diet, I have to change a bunch of things. And if I change a bunch of things, what am I going to call that thing that I changed? And to be honest, in that particular study that we did, vegan versus omnivore was quite an easy way to define what that was. I will add that in that study and two others that we've done recently, we made sure we said a healthy vegan and a healthy omnivore.
Yeah.
We did a healthy keto versus a healthy Mediterranean. We did a healthy low fat versus a healthy low carb, because in each of those in my field, Paul, it's pretty easy to be a proponent of one diet A.
Yeah.
And say, I'm comparing A and B, but you made a straw man crappy B to knock over. And then the headline says A better than B. And then next week, there's another scientist who's actually a proponent of B, and they made a kick-ass diet B and a straw man A. It's really crappy to knock over. And then it says B is better than A, and the public says, oh my God, the scientists never agree. But if you were to make a healthy vegan and a healthy omnivore, which is what we did.
Define healthy. What's healthy for me too?
Okay. And so whole foods. So even in the omnivore, whole foods, plant-based, we actually published a whole separate paper showing there's something called a healthy eating index, which goes through all the foods you ate for the day. And it says overall for vitamins and minerals, fiber, saturated fat, proteins, carbs, et cetera, are you getting a good balance of healthful nutrients, and are you minimizing the less healthy nutrients? So in the healthy eating index, it's scored from 0 to 100, and Americans typically score at 60, which if you are an academic, 60 is a fail. That's D. Okay, so nobody's really at 70, 80, or 90. So the healthy vegan and the healthy omnivore, we're up near 70 for both. So even when we had half the population stay omnivore, the omnivore that we were having them follow was healthier than their usual omnivorous diet, but they were different. So obviously the omnivore had more meat, more chicken, more pork, more eggs, more dairy, but they actually had more fruits and vegetables, and they had less added sugar and refined carbs. So it made it a healthy omnivorous diet. And if you can imagine on the vegan perspective, I know vegans who say in a condescending way, I'm better than you, I'm vegan. What are you eating right now? Oreos, French fries, and Coke? Yeah, that's vegan. It's like, you suck at being vegan. That is an unhealthy vegan diet. And so really the vegan diet took about 30% of the calories that had been coming from animal foods, dairy, eggs, and meat, and they had more beans and more vegetables and more whole grains. So that's the way they were designed, but quite a few of the foods were similar. The omnivores were eating veggies and fruits and whole grains.
Yeah.
So are the vegans. They were just eating more because they had to replace the calories of the meat, dairy, and eggs. That's how we defined it. Getting back to your point, though, when we finished, somebody said, well, that's completely unrealistic. The world's not going to go vegan. And I said, yeah, but that was really never the intent of the study. It wasn't to say the whole world has to do this. It was, what if we took a healthy omnivorous diet versus a healthy vegan diet? Would that neutralize any of the differences, or would we still see a drop in LDL cholesterol, weight, fasting insulin, longer telomere length, better biological clocks, and a healthier microbiome? Oh, how about it? All 6 of those things featured in the Netflix movie were better on the healthy vegan in only 8 weeks. So that was pretty powerful.
In looking at all of this work, you've obviously got a fairly substantial career and experience. What's missing in the evidence base? Like, when we start to talk about it, what do we need more research into, and what do you think there is a gap in terms of evidence?
Long-term behavior change.
Okay.
There's sort of 3 kinds of studies, and the first one I'll just blow past quickly, which is in a cell or an animal model, where you can be super isolationist and reductionist and understand a mechanism of why something in the diet might work. So put animals aside and only study humans. There's 2 basic things we can do. Is we can ask people to change their diet and see what happens. And most people are resistant to changing their diet, especially if it's a big change.
Yeah.
And this is the type of study I usually do, Paul. And if you can imagine, my longest study ever was a year. I've done 6-month studies. I've done 3-month studies. I've done 12 weeks. I've never done a study longer than a year. And in all the studies, when I publish them, I have to take beginning and middle and end data. And I have to say, here's what their diet looked like before. Here's how much of a change they made. And were they able to stick to it? Over time, were they falling off? Were they they listened, they were excited at first, and then they got tired of it and went back to their own ways? And it's always a range. Some people are better at sticking at it than others, but it is really hard to get people to sign up to make a big change. Keep this in mind. When I do my studies, you have to be randomly assigned.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Paul, do you want to be in the vegan crappy diet study? Okay. So I'm either going to give you vegan or crap. And you're like, well,
I want the vegan. Don't give me the crap.
I don't want that crap. And say, okay, I'm going to make it healthy vegan and healthy omnivore. And whatever it is, they have to agree to do either one for as long as I say. And that's okay. You're accustomed to eating this much meat, or you're accustomed to eating this. You're going to have to, there's a good chance, there's a 50-50 chance you're going to have to stop eating that. Oh, for how long, Professor Gardner? Well, forever, till you die. No one ever attempts a study like that. So, Paul, those studies all have to be realistic, that it could be a short amount of time. And instead of somebody getting diabetes or having a heart attack or developing cancer, my type of study is usually about lowering your weight or your bad cholesterol or improving your microbiome or something that you can measure every single day and could change in a reasonable amount of time. And the critique of those studies is always, well, you changed the marker, but you can't prove that you kept anybody out of the hospital. And I said, well, you're right. We have another kind of study for that. And that's called observational epidemiology. And in that kind of study, there's many of these going on around the world. They typically get literally tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people to describe what they're eating. And every 2 or 4 years, you get a letter that says, are you alive or are you dead? And if you're dead, they figure out what you died of. And if you're alive, do you have diabetes or something? Oh, no, you're perfectly healthy. Okay, thanks. We're going to write you again in 4 years and 4 years after that. And Paul, some of these studies have followed tens and thousands of people for up to 40 years. And so they actually know who lived or died if they got a heart attack or cancer. And what they do is they go back to all the food records they were keeping.
Yeah.
Say, wow, the people who ate the most or the least of this or that were the most likely to have good vitality and health or to get sick. And then the immediate criticism of that is, wait a second, those people also exercised more and smoked less and did this other thing. You can't prove it was the diet. I said, well, you're right. If I was going to prove it was the diet, I would have had to get those folks in the first study to follow my thing that was randomized for the rest of their life. And no one's willing to sign up for the rest of your life study unless you're not changing, unless we're just observing what happens, in which case the criticism is association, not causation. So, Paul, when I publish my study, here's what I'll do is I'll say, wow, I got these 44 twins to go vegan or healthy omnivore. And a couple of things happened. And let me tell you about a couple of mice studies and studies done in cells where mechanistically this makes sense. And it's pretty consistent with my colleagues at Harvard who tracked people for 40 years and found this difference. Wow, I just aligned the mechanistic data with my randomized clinical trial, which was fairly short term, to this really long observational epi. And so now as a health scientist and being part of the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, I'm going to say by coming at this from different angles, this is what we're going to advise the public to do because these align, but they're all getting at it from a different angle and none of them are sufficient by themselves to answer the question. So when you ask what's the gap and what's needed, I don't think we need more of those. We've been doing that for 30 or 40 years. We can come up with most of the answers. What we really need is, how did we motivate someone to make a change in that right direction, which is a whole food plant-based diet? And how did we help support them to maintain it in a food environment that's as toxic as the one in the US?
So would you say, if we're looking ahead, success looks like transforming the behavioral approach to education, or what would you say is the success for transforming how we eat?
So for me, that's why the stealth nutrition. So for the behavioral change, I think telling them their cholesterol is going to go down, it's going to sound better when they talk to their doctor, isn't enough. So I might motivate them with animal rights and welfare. I might motivate them with the environment. I might motivate them thinking about the line speeds in the slaughterhouses, so they should eat less meat so those humans don't get abused. And at the same time, we have to work in the food industry, which is making toxic food available 24/7, this new battle in the US over ultra-processed foods, not just the US, in other places as well. So in addition to motivating a behavior change in order to sustain that, you'd have to have access to food that would sustain that. And you'd have to pay farmers a living wage so that they could grow the food that would sustain you, not just monocropping soy and corn as we do in the US and busting that all into bits and pieces and putting it in a breakfast cereal with multicolored marshmallows, or making cheese that you spray out of a bottle.
I love it. Well, one of the things that I always like to kind of close off conversations with is a bit of a recurring question that we can all relate to, and it's around a food memory that's shaped you. So what's a food memory? It might not be the cheese that you spray out of the bottle, but what's a food memory that's really shaped you, that you always think about or reflect upon?
Another little side activity I do is, for 13 years now, we have run a summer farm camp.
Oh, amazing.
Every year we have 100 kids come for a week of camp, starts at breakfast and ends a little after lunch. We grow a lot of vegetables on this farm. It's an 11-acre organic farm at the Peterson Middle School in Sunnyvale, California. I have Stanford students who are the camp counselors / field researchers, because they're studying the behaviors of the kids who have to tend and weed and water and harvest and chop and saute and season lunch.
Amazing.
And so my fondest memories of food are honestly this smile I can't get off my face when, one, I see a kid eating this lunch at farm camp where there's got some ownership and some agency of the food that they've been seeing and working all day. And every once in a while, the other fond food memory is the parent behind them with a little tear coming down from their eye saying, "How did you do that? My kid only eats Taki Wizzo Spiso Cheezos. Like, I can't get them to eat like this at home." And we say, well, you know what, farm camp, we get them totally involved in all the food, and they see where it comes from, and they participate in creating it and seasoning it. And so it's just a different exposure. We think that's how it is, and we're thrilled that you got to see your kid eat that way. So that's not a personal one where I put food in my mouth, but that is like, oh my God, this is so much more satisfying than that big NIH grant that I got, where I understood the metabolism in a different way.
Yeah.
I saw one eat this thing that his parents say they could never imagine him eating. And it's a healthy, fresh, plant-based lunch.
Food brings so much joy, and I really appreciate the time that you've given me, Christopher, to share some of your experience and your knowledge. And I think there's a lot of resonance in the work that you're doing in terms of looking beyond your field of specialty into the broader system. And I think that really there's a lot to learn for all of us in thinking a little bit more broadly around the food that we eat and how we drive change, particularly for advocates looking to improve the food system. So thank you so much for joining us.
And thanks for what you do, because part of what we as scientists don't do well is communicate it.
You do better than some, Chris.
But just hearing, the passion that you bring to this and your effort to let's get at the heart of this. What are the important questions? What are the practical questions? It's really eye-opening for me to hear those and try to respond to them. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much, Christopher Gardner. Really appreciate it. Have a great day. Go enjoy some good whole foods, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.